She was wearing it at dinner. It was on the boat she never reached. It records every heartbeat, every minute, including the exact moment a heart stops. Investigators already have it. And sources say Lynette was dead before 8 p.m. She was wearing it at dinner. A powder pink Apple Watch band, visible on her left wrist in the last known photograph taken of Lynette Hooker alive, at the Abaco Inn on the evening of April 4, 2026. She was dancing by the pool. She had a Cuba Libre in her hand. She had no idea it was the last evening of her life. That watch ended up on Soulmate, the boat her husband Brian Hooker says she never made it back to. She made it back to the boat, and there was foul play, Lynette's mother Darlene Hamlet told Fox News Digital on July 8, 2026. Sources with knowledge of the investigation say evidence shows Lynette made it back to the couple's sailboat, Soulmate, where there were signs of a fight, evidence of foul play, and evidence that Lynette was dead on board. And sources close to the investigation say Lynette Hooker was dead before 8 p.m. on April 4, 2026, which would mean she was already dead before Brian's story about a dinghy accident, a missing dry bag, lost passports, and a 9-hour float to Marsh Harbour ever began. An Apple Watch does not just record that its wearer was alive. It records every heartbeat, every minute, with a timestamp, including the exact moment a heart stops. Investigators already have that watch. They already have access to its cloud data. And the before 8 p.m. timeline that sources are now confirming is consistent with investigators having already reviewed what that watch recorded on the night Lynette Hooker died. Brian Hooker has not been charged with any crime. His attorney Terrell Butler has categorically and unequivocally denied any wrongdoing on his behalf. We carry that through every section of this documentary, every time. But that watch was on her wrist at dinner. And it was on a boat Brian says she never reached. Lynette Ruth Hooker was 55 years old. She grew up in Michigan, in and around the lakes and waterways that shaped her from the beginning. Her mother Darlene Hamlet told investigators directly, "We grew up on water." She built a career in telecommunications, Michigan Bell, Ameritech, SBC Telecom, before she and Brian committed fully to the sailing life they had spent years dreaming about. In 2023, they bought a Morgan 461 sailboat in Rockport, Texas. A 1980 charter vessel from the Virgin Islands, a little rough on the edges, as Lynette described it on camera. They named it Soulmate. They documented everything on their YouTube channel, The Sailing Hookers. From the outside, it looked like exactly what they said it was, 2 people and 1 boat and open water. Her close friend Rachel Shaw described Lynette as completely at home on the water. Not a passenger. An active sailor who had spent years developing maritime instincts on open ocean passages through the Caribbean and the Bahamas. Her daughter Carly Ellsbury knew her mother's habits. She knew how Lynette moved. She knew her routines on the boat, including the habit that becomes one of the most forensically significant details in this entire case. Lynette took her Apple Watch off at night. Because the battery was old. Because it didn't hold well. And when she came home to Soulmate for the evening, she put it on the charger. That habit, that specific, documented, personal routine known to her daughter, is one of the reasons the watch's location on Soulmate tells investigators exactly what Brian's story requires it not to tell them. Lynette was 55 years old. She had built a career, raised a daughter, chosen the sea, and on the evening of April 4 she was dancing by the pool at the Abaco Inn with a Cuba Libre in her hand. She had no idea that the device on her wrist was keeping a record that would outlast her. Brian Hooker's account of April 4, 2026 has been stated publicly and consistently. Here it is, precisely, as he gave it. He and Lynette left the Abaco Inn dock at approximately 7:30 p.m. They boarded their 8-foot hard-bottom dinghy. They were heading back to Soulmate, anchored in Aunt Pat's Bay near Elbow Cay, a 12-minute ride in calm conditions. On that crossing, Lynette fell overboard. She had the engine's safety lanyard with her when she went in, which cut the motor. He threw a flotation device. He lost sight of her in the dark. The dinghy eventually drifted. He paddled. He ended up at the Marsh Harbour boatyard at 4 a.m. He never made it back to Soulmate that night. The boat sat empty and dark all night while Lynette was somewhere in the water. That is the foundation of his account. And it has one structural problem. Darlene Hamlet confirmed to Fox News Digital that the Apple Watch found on Soulmate was the watch Lynette was wearing on the night she disappeared. If Lynette never made it to Soulmate, if she went into the water from the dinghy midway through that crossing, then her watch did not make it to Soulmate either. She was wearing it. It would have gone into the water with her, or come off in a struggle and sunk, or stayed somewhere on the dinghy. Not on a boat that, by Brian's own account, nobody went back to. And if Brian never went back to Soulmate before rescue teams brought him there the following morning, which he has confirmed in multiple accounts, then Brian did not place it there either. The only logical answer is the one Darlene Hamlet confirmed and that sources close to the investigation have corroborated: Lynette made it back to Soulmate. She took the watch off the way she always did when she came home for the evening. She put it on the charger. And then something happened on that boat before 8 p.m. that she did not survive. This is the forensic core of why the watch matters beyond its physical location. Because where the watch ended up tells us Lynette made it to Soulmate. But what the watch recorded tells investigators what happened to her when she got there. An Apple Watch records heart rate data continuously, every minute, logged with a precise timestamp. If Lynette was in an altercation, if she was frightened, if her heart rate elevated during a struggle, that surge is in the data. The elevated beats per minute. The specific minute the heart rate began to climb. And the specific minute it stopped. The accelerometer records movement patterns continuously. Walking, running, struggling, those motion signatures are in the data. Apple Watches are specifically programmed to detect falls and log them. A significant impact registers as an abnormal movement event, time-stamped. If the Apple Watch was connected to Lynette's iPhone, and if that iPhone connected to Soulmate's Starlink satellite internet system, then GPS coordinates of the watch's location were being logged at the time of each health event. The watch knows exactly where it was. And at the moment her heart stopped, that timestamp and that location are in the data. Think about the forensic significance of that. Not where she was last seen. Not where Brian says the dinghy was when she allegedly fell. The exact GPS coordinates and exact timestamp of the moment Lynette Hooker's heart stopped. The parallel to the Chris Watts case is precise. In 2018, Watts' Fitbit tracked his movement and heart rate in the early morning hours when he claimed to have been asleep. That data placed him awake and active at a time consistent with the murders. His Fitbit helped break his account entirely. The Apple Watch in the Lynette Hooker case is the same forensic category of evidence, a wearable device recording biological data, time-stamped, synced to cloud storage, and capable of directly contradicting the account given by the person who was with the victim at the time of death. Here is what many people do not fully understand about how Apple Watch data works, and why it matters enormously for this investigation. The Apple Watch does not store its data only on the device itself. It syncs automatically and continuously to the paired iPhone, and from the iPhone to iCloud, Apple's remote server storage. Which means the data on Lynette's Apple Watch does not live only on the physical device found on Soulmate. It lives on Apple's servers. Apple is a United States company. Federal investigators, the Coast Guard Investigative Service, working with the Department of Justice, can reach those servers with a federal subpoena. They do not need the physical watch in hand to get the data. They need the subpoena and they get everything. Every heartbeat. Every step. Every timestamp. Going back as far as the account history holds. CBS News confirmed evidence from this case is being processed at the FBI laboratory in Quantico, Virginia. Digital forensics at that level includes the extraction and analysis of cloud-synced health data from wearable devices. Federal investigators have done this before. They know how to subpoena it. They know how to read it. They know how to present it to a jury in a way that makes the timeline impossible to dispute. And there is a second cloud layer specific to Soulmate. The boat had a Starlink satellite internet terminal. When Lynette's iPhone came within range of that network, the way any phone connects to a familiar Wi-Fi network, automatically, without any action from the user, it began syncing. Everything stored locally on the phone since the last sync, health data, location data, activity data, all of it uploading through the Starlink connection to iCloud. That connection event was logged on SpaceX's servers with a timestamp showing exactly when Lynette's phone joined the Soulmate network, which is also the moment Lynette herself arrived at Soulmate. That timestamp is on SpaceX servers. The KAIS with DOJ support can reach it by subpoena and has been processing digital evidence from this case at Quantico since the investigation intensified in May. A U.S. official confirmed the GPS data from one of Brian Hooker's devices showed movements that did not align with what he told investigators. The device was out on the water, stopping in the Sea of Abaco before returning. The Apple Watch data shows when Lynette died. The Starlink connection log shows when she arrived at Soulmate. Brian could not reach back in time and delete any of it. Every system on that boat was keeping a record of April 4th. This is the detail that elevates the Apple Watch evidence from circumstantial to direct, because it is not just a watch on a boat. It is a watch on a boat where something happened. Sources with knowledge of the investigation told Ashley Banfield's Drop Dead Serious podcast that evidence shows Lynette made it back to Soulmate, where there were signs of a fight, evidence of foul play, and evidence that Lynette was dead on board. News Nation reported that Banfield said the family told her authorities believe evidence shows Hooker made it back to Soulmate, where there were signs of a fight, possible foul play, and evidence that Lynette was dead on board. The Coast Guard investigators who seized Soulmate were looking for something specific. Forensic scientist Joseph Scott Morgan told Fox News Digital they were likely looking for signs of large focal areas of blood, a copious amount of blood, dried blood. Has there been any effort to sanitize the area, clean the area? He acknowledged the delay in seizing the boat, more than a month after Lynette disappeared, presented challenges. The more time passes, he said, the more evidence degrades. But digital evidence does not degrade. The Apple Watch data on Apple's servers is the same today as it was at the moment it was recorded. The Starlink connection log on SpaceX's servers is unchanged. The GPS coordinates from Brian's own device, already confirmed to contradict his account, were there when investigators first pulled them. The physical evidence on Soulmate may have been subject to the passage of time. The digital record was not. This detail has not received the weight it deserves. And it should be in the documented record of every coverage of this case. Soulmate was equipped with a $33,000 thermal imaging camera. A device specifically designed to detect heat signatures in dark conditions, including a person in open water at night. Questions have been raised about why Brian Hooker didn't use the thermal camera on Soulmate to search for his wife. If Lynette had gone overboard from the dinghy mid-crossing, as Brian claims, a thermal camera could have detected her heat signature in the water in the dark. It is precisely the kind of equipment that an experienced mariner, or even an inexperienced one desperately searching for a spouse, would reach for immediately. Brian never used it. His friend Marnie Stevenson confirmed this publicly. Brian Hooker didn't use $33,000 thermal boat camera to look for wife, Fox News reported, attributing this to a friend's statement. The thermal camera does not prove anything on its own. But place it alongside the Apple Watch, the signs of a fight on Soulmate, the GPS data that contradicts Brian's account, and the before 8 p.m. timeline from investigators, and a pattern emerges of a man who, if Lynette had truly gone overboard in open water, had tools to find her and did not use them. One more detail that reframes the timeline in a specific, documented way. According to reporting from Ashley Banfield's investigation, there is a photograph of Brian Hooker at the dinghy dock at 7 p.m. on April 4th, walking toward the dinghy alone, wearing his floppy hat. Without Lynette. That photograph places Brian at the dock 30 minutes before he told investigators they left together. 30 minutes before his stated departure time of 7:30 p.m. If Brian was at the dock at 7 p.m., and if they left the Abaco Inn together, why does the photograph show him alone at the dock at that hour? Why does his own timeline begin 30 minutes later than what the photograph records? That discrepancy has not been explained by Brian or his legal team. The photograph, the Apple Watch, the Starlink timeline, the GPS data from his own device, the signs of a fight on Soulmate, the thermal camera never used, these are not separate details from separate corners of the investigation. They are threads from the same evidentiary picture, all pointing in the same direction. According to a U.S. official familiar with the matter, the government has been investigating this case as a possible foreign murder of a U.S. national for weeks, and that investigative posture has remained consistent. While public statements have generally described the matter as a criminal investigation, officials have been examining the case under the framework of a federal statute that covers the foreign murder of U.S. nationals/site. That is a specific legal framework with specific implications. The foreign murder of a U.S. national statute gives federal prosecutors jurisdiction over murders committed against American citizens abroad, even when those murders occur outside United States territory. It is the same framework used in other high-profile American deaths overseas. A Coast Guard source told News Nation the case is being investigated as a possible murder. A Coast Guard spokesperson pushed back, saying they cannot indicate that it is a murder investigation at this time. But no body, prosecutor Tad DiBiase explained on News Nation's Brian Enton Investigates podcast that the probable cause in this case is built on Brian's own story, that by his own account, the dinghy GPS does not match his stated narrative. DiBiase noted that you can prosecute a murder case without a body when the digital and physical evidence is strong enough. He has done it. He knows the framework. And he assessed, from public reporting alone, that the GPS contradiction establishes probable cause. Lynette's body has not been recovered. The Coast Guard dove in the Sea of Abaco based on GPS coordinates from Brian's own device. The data shows the device was out on the water, stopping in the Sea of Abaco before returning, giving investigators a more precise location to search. The Coast Guard also returned the dinghy to the United States for further forensic examination. The dinghy Lynette was last known to be on, being processed alongside the Soulmate evidence at Quantico. Lynette's stepfather Bill Hamlet has spoken publicly about details that deserve to be in the full record of this case. Bill Hamlet told News Nation that Brian Hooker had long talked about wanting to live off the grid, not wanting anybody to tell him what to do or where to go. He also noted that Brian Hooker's brother owns a remote cabin in the mountains of California with no electricity or phone service. That detail, raised in the context of investigators asking whether Brian might flee if an arrest appeared imminent, is a documented statement from Lynette's family. It is not an accusation. It is a documented concern expressed by people who knew Brian Hooker personally. Bill Hamlet said, "He not only took one life, he really took a bunch of lives. The impact he's had on Darlene and Carly is immeasurable." He was careful to frame his conclusion as a family member's belief, not an investigative finding. No charge has been filed. Brian Hooker has maintained his innocence in every public forum available to him. But the family's account, Darlene's statement that Lynette made it back to the boat and there was foul play, Bill's account of Brian's stated desire to live off the grid, Carly's documented knowledge of her mother's Apple Watch habits, forms a picture of people who knew this man and this relationship from the inside. And who have collectively stated, on the record, that Brian Hooker's account of what happened is not what actually happened. As of late July 2026, here is the complete confirmed record. The case is being investigated as a possible murder. The government has been examining it under the framework of a federal statute covering the foreign murder of U.S. nationals. Brian Hooker was arrested in the Bahamas, questioned extensively, and released when the legal detention clock expired. He is confirmed as a suspect. He has not been charged. Evidence is being processed at the FBI laboratory at Quantico, Virginia. The Soulmate was seized by the Coast Guard 40 nautical miles off Melbourne, Florida on May 11. It is in U.S. federal custody. The dinghy has also been returned to the U.S. for forensic examination. Coast Guard investigators conducted dive searches in the Sea of Abaco based on GPS coordinates from Brian's own device. Darlene Hamlet confirmed to Fox News Digital, she made it back to the boat, and there was foul play. Sources with knowledge of the investigation say there were signs of a fight on Soulmate, evidence of foul play, and evidence Lynette was dead on board. Sources say she was dead before 8 p.m. on April 4th. Lynette's Apple Watch was found on Soulmate. Darlene confirmed it was the watch Lynette was wearing that night. The watch syncs to iCloud. Federal investigators can reach Apple's servers by subpoena. The Starlink connection log is on SpaceX servers, also reachable by subpoena. The GPS data from Brian's own device contradicts his account. Brian's attorney Crystal Marie Hauer has stated publicly, there is absolutely no evidence supporting any allegation against her client. That denial is on the record and is noted here as such. Lynette Hooker's body has not been recovered. The investigation is active. No charge has been filed. She was dancing at the Abaco Inn on the evening of April 4th. A powder pink Apple Watch on her wrist. A Cuba Libre in her hand. No idea it was the last evening of her life. That watch ended up on the boat her husband says she never reached. Her mother says she made it back to that boat. Sources say there were signs of a fight. Sources say she was dead before 8 p.m. The watch recorded every heartbeat. Every step. The exact moment her heart stopped, timestamped, logged, synced to Apple's servers through the Starlink connection on a boat that Brian says was empty and dark all night. Investigators already have that watch. They have already had access to its cloud data since at least May, when Soulmate was seized and the Quantico processing began. The before 8 p.m. timeline that sources confirm is consistent with what that watch recorded. Brian Hooker has not been charged. He has maintained his innocence. His attorneys deny all allegations. And Lynette Hooker has been missing for 109 days. She was wearing that watch at dinner. The watch was recording. And the people who have seen what it recorded are building a case that, when it arrives, will not need to argue about what happened on April 4th. The watch already knows. If you have any information about the disappearance of Lynette Hooker, submit tips through the Kai's Tips app, available on iOS and Android, or contact the U.S. Coast Guard Investigative Service. Supporting the family, GoFundMe, Lynette Hooker missing in Bahamas. Hopetown Volunteer Fire and Rescue, who deployed and gave everything to this search. Lynette Hooker deserves to be found. And the watch on her wrist that evening was keeping a record.